Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Hootie Who KSU Football Podcast. Pretty big week, actually. Not specifically for Kennesaw State, but more just the sport in general. Some really big things have happened, so that's what I'm going to dedicate this episode to, because I don't really have much going on with Kennesaw State. They did have their camp this week, bringing local high school players in, fostering future relationships. That's what's taking place. A lot of good stuff online about that camp. Additionally, again, like and subscribe to the show. 5-star ratings are greatly appreciated. If you want to check out the Etsy store at CFB RVing, please do. Variety of shirts, all sorts of stuff over there. All proceeds go back into the show and allow me to continue doing this. So, this week, there was a ruling finally. It's funny because I brought it up last week. Because I knew it was kind of coming, but it was just so funny that I think Monday or Tuesday this past week, the ruling did come down. So now we have an idea about what we're going to do with NIL, about how it's going to be enforced, what this means for walk-ons, and kind of the future of the sport going forward. So we'll go through each of these different things, and then I'll kind of, at the end, give some opinion about what I think this does. Again, I mean, the whole thing is based on how do you pay players while also trying to control the outside influence of the boosters with tapping up players from other programs. There's a kid from Wisconsin who ended up at Miami. There's another one too. I think Arkansas's quarterback going to UCLA, same kind of thing. We all know about the Tennessee situation with the quarterback, about trying to hold out prior to going on to the playoffs and putting Tennessee in a really bad spot. There was some legislation passed by Tennessee to be more friendly towards Tennessee schools with this situation. This ruling overtakes that ruling pretty much, so that it's more of a national ruling that all programs need to follow if they opt to go into this program. So basically, on July 1st, this goes into effect. The highlights, excuse me, real fast. The highlights to this program are that $20.5 million is the number they're looking at right now as a revenue sharing that schools can pay players directly. So $20.5 million is going to be the cap on all Power 4 schools. This is noted as maybe the greatest shift in the history of college athletics. The NCAA, in regards to football, they're done. It's over. They have no control anymore. So that has been a major shift. This idea of amateur sports, we can put that behind us now. It's never been really an amateur sport, even though they pretend it is. It's definitely not an amateur sport any longer. So some of the biggest things are $20.5 million right now, upwards to $33 million in the next decade. That's where it's going to go. I don't think we'll go another decade with this system. Something else will get challenged and replace it, but we'll talk about that in the end. So as an athletic department in Division I, you've got $20.5 million to funnel however you want. So what they're projecting right now is 20% going towards football. 70% of that 20.5 million going to football, so around 15 million. And then from there, you're looking at another, 15% going to basketball, 5 going to softball, another 5 with the remaining sports. Here's where it gets interesting, though, looking at basketball, is those non-football schools can use this $20.5 million however they want. And that's true with any school. You can use the 20. You don't have to do 70% to football. There is no guidance to that. It's simply, here's your $20.5 million. How do you want to apply it to your different schools or your different sports? So if I'm a school like UConn, for example, yeah, that's a good example. A school like UConn, which Kentucky's kind of in the same way, not as much as UConn, but your revenue at a school like UConn would be through basketball. So if you decide to send 50% of your 20.5 million to basketball, you can do that. If you are a non-football school, you can change your allotments up however you want, with the majority of it going to basketball. Now, the thing to watch with that, I think, is watch those non-football playing schools become real powerhouses as far as the NCAA tournament goes, basketball goes. That's something to really pay attention to, because it's always, you think you fix one thing, but you break something else. So all of the non-football playing universities may be the best basketball schools, and maybe the future of national titles in college basketball. So we will see kind of how that aspect plays out. But right now we are being more football centric. Title IX will play a role in this. So women's sports are going to need to be compensated, or there will be issues with that. How do you enforce this? And that's been the question the whole time. So there's going to be a college sports commission. Their job is to oversee how this distribution is taken, to enforce if people are doing the wrong thing, but also to approve all deals. So as a college athlete, you can get paid by the university out of that $20.5 million bucket, but you also have the right to seek out contracts with private business. Gatorade, Nike, New Balance, whatever. You can still do that. The College Sports Commission, the CSC, we'll call them going forward, they have to approve all deals, all outside deals. And it has to be a market-based approval. So you cannot pay a third-string quarterback who's doing an advertisement for a local restaurant multiple millions of dollars, because that's not what that player's market value is. How is market value assigned? That's a great question. So the market value is going to be assigned through an independent company, the ones that work with the pro football, Delot, something like that. They have a program out there, or sports software, where they come up with market prices. And these are what they give the larger sports companies. Again, we'll go with Nike, for example, of how much to play a star wide receiver or star quarterback in the NFL. This same entity will then be applied to college athletics as well. So your star players, your quarterbacks, running backs, defensive linemen, wide receivers, they will have a larger market value than a rotational offensive lineman, for example. So, but those players still have the opportunity to win. I had read some stories about, a quarterback using their dog for a PetSmart commercial. You can do that. Underneath the CSC, in a study that's done recently, they said that's 90% of the contracts that athletes have signed previously would still be approved. They've gone back and they reviewed it using the current system, or the future system, I should say, taking those rules and applying it to old contracts to see if they would hold up. 90% of the business contracts for athletes would still be approved. However, 70% of the booster donations, the NIL donations, would be rejected. So why is that? Well, what they're trying to do is they're trying to curb the boosters from controlling who goes to which school, the pay-for-play model, basically, that, you have recruits coming around during the transfer portal and just seeking the biggest offer. And, they'll say that, this school offers me $1 million, these boosters are offering me $2 million, these boosters are offering me $3 million, I'm going to go with $3 million. So that is what they're trying to curb, is that whole pay-for-play model. Will it be successful? We'll see. We'll see if it will do that. I mean, I think it's a start. I don't know how collective bargaining isn't in the future. I mean, basically the pros light. I mean, I think that's where we're going, but I'll get to that in a few minutes. So 70% of those would have been rejected by the CSC. So that will be something to pay attention to. The main job for the CSC is going to be to approve funding to student athletes. It will also be the enforcement arm to the sport, to all the conferences. Now, what they're looking for is players going outside of that 20.5 million and outside of that business agreement, kind of like what I was saying with the boosters, just giving money. So they're looking for those players who are trying to skirt the rules a little bit. If those players are discovered, the player can be ruled ineligible. If a coach is involved, the coach can be removed from the team for a year, kind of what happened with Sean Payton and the Saints a few years ago. In the worst case scenario, a team could receive the death penalty. What that simply means is that they can no longer play that sport for a period of time. What it used to mean, which would be an SMU reference from the early 80s, is that they found that they were cheating by paying their players. Everybody did. They just did it more out in the open. Is they removed all football scholarships. So it's taken about 40 years for SMU to even come back to anything. This past year has been their most successful year. So, the death penalty is no joke. That would be probably next level as far as a punishment. It would have to be widespread corruption in a program. So a lot of schools, they have collectives. And collectives are kind of the in-between between the university and the player. They're the ones who are compensating through NIL the players. So collectives are going to go away in a sense. What the prediction is that the schools will hire the collectives as part of the school, be a school branch basically, and they can handle the negotiations of contracts, getting students opportunities to work with private companies to get compensation, but they will now not be their own entity. They'll be through the school. So that's one way that probably collectives will transition, because they are probably well ahead of where the universities are operating right now of how to kind of navigate this market. But what they're really trying to do is to prevent some of the issues that have been happening with the transfer portal, with the multiple free agencies, with teams having to re-recruit players. We're not out of the woods with that yet. I still think that there'll be some issues with that, but no one knows yet if the contracts will be binding when player A goes and plays for Georgia Tech. They signed an NIL deal with Coca-Cola, which is based in Atlanta, and they also are getting paid through the university. There is nothing written yet to say that player cannot then leave and go to a different school the following school year. So that's still to be determined of kind of what that's going to do. A lot of schools are creating contracts on their own saying that you must give us so many years of service before you can transfer to a different university if you accept this amount of money from our budget, from our 20.5 pot or cap that they can spend. So we'll see kind of how that works out. My thoughts with this is that you have to take a step, because right now it's out of control. It's just the disparity in schools right now. We've talked about this in the past on this program with the Big Ten and the SEC is getting so large. The gap is getting so large that it's just going to get to the point to where it's 5 teams every year and no one else really matters because they can't compete because they don't have the level of talent. So that is kind of what they're trying to do, is to try to make it competitive across the board. And this will make it competitive across the board while it stands. Why I say that is that there will be challenges. There will be lawsuits about this ruling, because of course there will. Because players can claim that you are limiting the amount of money that they can make by putting a cap on their earnings, which you could argue either way. So for the time being, at least for the next school year, how about that? How about that for the silver lining? At least for the next school year, this should be in play. And so we have teams that will be operating starting July 1st on the same budget. And we'll kind of see what impact that has down the road. Obviously, it won't have an impact next year, but I think if it's allowed to continue for a few years, you'll start to see the impact down the road in a few years, where teams that were kind of middle of the road can start competing for national titles. I think that's the hope of it, because the problem is that college football is the second most viewed product on television. The NFL is number one, college football is number two in America. I mean, people, I know someone out there saying something about soccer, so we're talking about America right now. And I think that fans are becoming disinterested in this. They're getting tired of players coming for one season and the next, and just the loyalty and the money going out to these players. So college football isn't as they need to do something, because people are going to start losing interest and start being interested in something else. I think you'll always root for your team, but as a sport of the whole, you're going to start being less interested. And that's true with just the playoffs in general, with the college football playoffs, because if you see the same matchup year after year after year, you kind of lose interest in it. You know, how many times can you watch Georgia, Ohio State, Alabama, Alabama, Clemson, for example? I mean, they're good games and all, but I mean, year after year after year after year, it's not very interesting. I thought that was one of the best things that happened last year, was that you got to see a few teams that you normally don't see. The Arizona States, the Boise States, SMU, I'm forgetting one. Notre Dame making the run that they did, Penn State being involved in it. I mean, it was nice to have someone different, at least a little different. Now with the 14 teams as well, you'll even see a bigger increase in how many teams you'll see playing for the college football championship. So that's a positive for sure. So we'll see what happens. You know, I remember when this all started, and not even where it went into place yet. It just that they were talking about doing this. And what I thought was then, which I still think now, by the way, if this model holds, how is it that teams that are in a more metropolis based don't have a competitive advantage over more rural based colleges? Okay, so for example, Georgia Tech is in the heart of Atlanta. If you are in the heart of Atlanta, then you have more opportunities to offer your student athletes advertisement opportunities versus a team like Georgia or Clemson. Both those teams are in smaller cities. Athens is not that big. Anderson, South Carolina is not that big versus a city like Atlanta, Los Angeles, Miami. I mean, those are massive markets. And so all of a sudden, those teams that find themselves as city universities basically may have a competitive advantage because they can offer so many private businesses to their student athletes. So that will be something to kind of pay attention to a little bit. I'm kind of curious to see if that shift, I've always thought it was going to happen. It hasn't yet. And being a Georgia native driving around, I see a lot of advertisements for Georgia players in the city of Atlanta because this state is a majority of Georgia fans versus Georgia Tech fans. Just, it is. So we'll see. We'll see. I just always think it's interesting to look at teams that are based in large cities. Like USC, for example, should be a juggernaut as far as all the opportunities out there, all the star power that's out there. They should be the hardest team to recruit against because they can offer more than anybody else can. Miami's right there as well, which I would hate because I do not like Miami. But the school, that is, the city's great. But we'll see. Maybe they can build a stadium on their own campus now. It's a Miami joke. Those of you who know. Yeah, so I mean, we'll see kind of where this goes. I think it is a step in the right direction. But there's some other things to consider with this is that they've changed the scholarship number. So football is 105, basketball is 15, I think baseball is 25, something like that. So that's interesting. And I say that's interesting because you're going to say, someone out there is going to think that, well, I mean, scholarships for a football team is 80, so now it's 105. Well, yes and no. So it is 80, but at the same time, you have walk-ons. You have a ton of walk-ons. Walk-ons are gone now, so no more walk-ons. So every player on your team must be under scholarship, so you have 105 max. So that's going to be something to pay attention to. Now, those walk-ons that were losing spots because people were preparing for this shift, they are allowed to come back or be compensated, basically. They get to be grandfathered in, but after this season, that grandfather contract basically is null and void. So going forward, no more walk-ons. So how does this apply to the school that we cover, which is Kennesaw State? Because this is the Hootie Who KSU podcast. I think it gives you a competitive edge. I think that I shouldn't say edge. It makes you competitive. If you're recruiting against your larger neighbors and they only have an infinite amount of money to spend, they can't take everybody, right? And again, I continue to say one of Kennesaw State's greatest advantages is the recruitment base, the talent base here in the state of Georgia. This can definitely give them the opportunity to offer players a competitive salary versus those larger institutions if we're all playing from the same pot. Plus take advantage of being closer to the city of Atlanta for any commercial opportunities for their players. It definitely gives them the opportunity to be more competitive than they have been. Now, the school has to invest this money. That's the thing. The school has to be able to invest this 20.5 to even have this be a relevant conversation. And we'll see. We'll see. At the end of the day, football is what's going to pay the bills, so it would be the university and the university's best interest, in my opinion, to focus in on basketball and football for sure, because those will generate the most money. So we will see what they decide to do. I've looked at some previews this week as well. They're out there now about Kennesaw State and what the projections are. They project a rough season. I don't know if I agree with that yet or not. We'll see. I mean, that's the whole thing with these preseason magazines is they don't know. They assume they know, but they don't know. 3-3-5 was the defense. Pistol set was what was said for the offense, which that's fine. You can call it a pistol if you want. I'll call it a spread. It's the same thing. Go fast, move quick. Pistol, if you don't know, is the quarterback lines up not quite in a shotgun, but further back behind center with a running back behind him. So the running back starts incredibly deep to give them a more explosive start. It also allows for shifting of the wide receivers to come in front of the quarterback because you have that much space between you and the center. So we'll see. But yeah, I mean, some projections I saw were like 2 wins, things like that. I don't know if I think that's true. I don't think that's true because I'm still saying 6 wins, but that's just me. We'll see. We'll see. I hope so, but this is exciting. I like the transition to where this is going. I like to just get it done, right? And so now you're going to have challenges come in. I mentioned it earlier, even in this show, is that you'll have challenges that you're limiting how much a player can make. That's possible. I don't know how long that will take to go through and then what the next steps are. We're probably a couple years away before a change. I think, again, it shapes up for the 2030. 2030, I think, is the seismic shift in college football. I think it's super conferences. I think you have more of a pro style kind of contracts, player expectations, etc. It'll be the pros. It'll be the NFL and college football, basically, with the 2 largest conferences expanding, with the best purebred or blue blood, football teams playing in these 2 conferences. So we'll see. We'll see kind of what happens. Someone's going to find a way around it. Someone's going to find a way to kind of bend the rules to their advantage. Hopefully this starts to limit the pay-for-play model where teams are having to compete against other teams for how much money they're going to give an individual player if we're all working in the same confines of a $20.5 million salary cap, hopefully. But there'll be some wiggle room around that, so we'll see what impact it has. I think one of the biggest impacts would be to lose the winter transfer window and just do a spring only. I mean, that's kind of a no-brainer. It causes too much disruption, especially when you consider it's happening right before bowl games begin. So you still open yourself up to a player trying to renegotiate a contract prior to playing in bigger games like the Tennessee quarterback did last year. That has to not happen because they can hold teams hostage for whatever they want. So hopefully this kind of curbs that a little bit. So we'll see. All right, guys, that's all I got for you this week. Thanks for listening. I would say do your own research online as well if you want to follow up with any of this stuff. But I pulled this from several different articles to make it as digestible as possible. Because I mean, it is definitely a lot of legal speak, but I think it will have a massive impact on college football for the next few seasons, and then we'll see what happens from there regarding if this ruling is challenged by different players, etc. Oh, I forgot. Another thing about this is players that were not able to benefit from this NIL world that we live in right now, the NCAA has to pay out $2.5 billion to those players. Now, how that's determined, I don't know. What players, I don't know. But basically, the NCAA was getting sued because players were not able to benefit from their name, image, and likeness, while the university and the sport itself and the NCAA was able to benefit from these players. So that's also another thing. And as I've said before, I will always support players being compensated for putting their bodies on the line for benefiting a university, because the universities are benefiting off them and have been for a while. Coaches make $10 million a year and can leave whenever they want. Why can't players? Universities have been making billions and billions off of these student athletes for decades, and I said billions, not millions. Have been making money off them for decades and not having to pay a single dime, saying that it was amateur sports and therefore they didn't have to pay them, which is ridiculous. And that's why you had a lot of the corruptions with the brown paper bags of money, with what happened in Tennessee a few years ago with players pulling up at McDonald's and getting a bag of cash to come play there. So hopefully this will put an end to all of that. I mean, who knows? But I definitely think players should get paid. I think we need to bring these coaching salaries down a little bit, especially since they show very little loyalty to the teams themselves. How do we hold players to that level of accountability, but not coaches? So hopefully we can kind of get the money under control and make this a more interesting topic or a sport to follow, versus where it's going, where people are just kind of losing interest because it's so convoluted and it's just so much money, and players just doing what's best for them, which they can. But as fans of a program, we would love for them to kind of stay there as long as they would like, and to see through their 3 or 4 years. So we'll see. All right, like I said, thanks so much. Like and subscribe. Check out the store. Purchase a shirt. Goes back to the program. I really appreciate the follows. Thanks so much. For any feedback, any comments, I will read them all and respond to them accordingly. And we'll talk to you next week. Have a good week, guys. Bye.